Fabulous. Okay, I think it's time for us to start now. I've pressed the record button, which is fantastic. Welcome on board, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the next Lunch and Learn, being presented by Jenny and Bea from FWAG Southwest. The topic today, as you can see, is what can valuing farmers and good farm advice achieve for catchment management, which is great. Just one or two housekeeping notes, which is please try and keep your camera on for the sake of engagement and support to our presenters, where possible, of course. And if you could try and keep your questions till the end of the presentation, or if you don't want to lose your train of thought, feel free to type it into the chat and we'll make sure that it's addressed before the end of the presentation. Thank you very much. Over to you, Jenny and Bea.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to start and then Bea's going to do a bit of the last few slides as well. So it's going to be both of us. Thanks very much for inviting us to present our work. I'm just going to run through some of the main highlights of what you've asked us to talk about, should I say. You know, why should you involve farmers? From our view, you know, they have essential knowledge, they own the land, they manage the land, and can have a huge impact on the catchment. And good farming is the most important thing that we want to incentivise, but we also want to have happy farmers that are part of the team. So from our perspective, our USP as a charity is that we represent farmers that actually care about the environment. We're a farmer-led charity. Our trustees are farmers, and many of our advisors are either from farming families or have strong farming associations. Our aim is really to go down the farm gate, be helpful, listen, learn, understand what the pressures are for that farmer, and try and enable them to be supported to help us in catchment management. So over the last, oh gosh knows how many years, I've been involved in many farmer-led projects or farmer-involved projects, and that's really because, as I just said, from our perspective, we feel that farming and land use is essential to climate change, to helping us rebuild biodiversity and ecology and build our resilience for flooding and food security. And farmers, from our perspective, as people, we all respond better to be valued and be part of a team. And actually, the whole approach that we take is that they should be involved from the very beginning of anything that we want to do within our locality, within our catchments. So our perspective has been as an organisation to try and bring that team of farmers into those conversations with our trusted friends that we have in the Environment Agency, water companies, local authorities, other NGOs, and all the other people that we work with. So since 2012, we were one of the first host organisations for the catchment-based approach. There were some pilots that went out. As I say, our farmers in our locality were very keen to be involved with that. That followed on with the first DEFRA Payments for Ecosystem Services pilot, where I remember sitting in a pub with all of the farmers saying, oh gosh, this is some challenges we've got to try and understand about who will pay for land use change, as it was then. And we've been sort of like lucky enough to be involved with some really significant projects that are now international case studies, like the WILD project, the Water with Integrated Local Delivery project, which is now over 10 years ago, but that was about trying to help build community resilience with a focus not only on water quality, but on flood mitigation, about how you can connect groups of farmers and communities together to build resilience, something that we've spent a further 10 years amplifying and fine-tuning, which I'll talk a bit about today. And then obviously farmer groups and farmer clusters. Yeah, we had one of the first ones a long time ago. We had 102 members of ours in I think 25,000 hectares. But we learned really interestingly that actually, rather than having massive groups of farmers, that it's really important to keep the culture. And actually, we're now scaling down back to a sort of water body level of groups of farmers that are directly connected with their communities and trying to build that resilience. And you see, I was going to go on to these projects forever, but there were some amazing things that we've done. And I think what I'm going to run through today is particularly the outputs of the ELMS trials, the Environmental Land Management Scheme trials, because for the last 7-8 years since DEFRA, we've been involved in trying to create integrity around evidencing the opportunities for investment in farmland for wider multifunctional societal benefit. So just talking about that as a baseline, what we started to do was to be able to start to see how we could create an opportunity for real farm data, real farm change, to actually create an opportunity for that to be basically fed through to create that integrity around investment, and whether that investment was going to be coming from public sector or private sector or third sector, or the farmers running businesses that changed land use. We wanted to be able to explore how we could really evidence sort of climate positivity, ecological recovery, biodiversity recovery, and using a lot of really interesting technologies that basically working with the Centre for Ecology and Hydrology, Rothamsted, Ordnance Survey, Land App. We've ended up being able to create mapping methodologies that actually enable us to share with the industry. So the Land App now is able to take a lot of these different data sets and be able to start to create a best guess baseline for us. So why do we need to do that? Why do the farmers need to have a baseline? They really, we want to ask them what it is that they would like to do on their land. How do they want to be adaptive to climate change? How can they cope with too much water for some of the time and not enough water for the rest of the time? And how can we evidence for those wanting to invest in that landscape to be able to see, to involve the culture of the farm, of aggregation of farmers across landscapes, but to evidence that climate and nature positivity. And we also worked really closely with Sustainable Food Trust and the Global Farm Metric. So the idea being now that we can actually start to help farmers to understand where they are, what ecosystem services are coming from their land, and how we can actually value those as services from society, and how we can improve those by actually helping their businesses be resilient, but also to see how we can improve the opportunity for holding water, cleaning water, managing healthy soils, building soil ecology, putting in wetlands and woodlands and new hedges and agroforestry and all the things we're talking about, and how we can measure that as a society for that improvement from which we will all benefit. So one of the things that we've been working on really closely with the farmers' permission is when we've collected that data, and we've done quite a lot of that through the process of using the best of technologies. So we've been using translated satellite data and land cover data. And then what we do is we basically have a conversation with our friends who are farmers and say, is this right? Of the habitats we've actually mapped, are they right on your land? What is it you'd like to do? What investments and infrastructure would you like? What risks have you got? What fears of regulations or changes in water rules do you need? And can we see what the ambition is with your land management plans, as they're termed now, to actually be able to see whether or not we can create opportunities for investment from multiple sources. So our local nature recovery strategy in Gloucestershire, they're all being out for consultation at the moment, is what we're suggesting is a really good baseline for being able to understand the state of play in a geospatial area. We've attributed ecosystem service functionality to all of the different habitat types that are there. But most importantly, we can now publish farm data from our farms through to our local nature recovery strategy. And this is a slightly complex slide that Bea was going to take out. But actually, I think it's really important, because what it enables us to do is to be able to give the farmers the opportunity to share real data with our locality that can link to our economic opportunities and our climate resilience, and actually show how we are increasing sequestering carbon or recovering biodiversity or having greater connectivity of habitats. And that gives us a chance to be able to make sure that data is real and not imaginary. So from really 6 to 7 years of doing all of this work with some really extraordinary partners, we found that this was a really interesting opportunity to be able to scale. What we learned was that there is a huge amount of data that is out there, both from the obviously catchment-based approach, but also now building through local nature recovery strategies. But there wasn't what we found was in the work that we did, particularly with the approach that we take, is that there isn't any sort of cultural evidence of what people want to do. There's a lot of the sort of top-down what we think we want to happen to build, a framework for resilience or habitat restoration, or areas for priority. But actually, we need to build in this social and human element of it, that actually the people who own the land, farm the land, and the communities that actually build within that should come from them as well, to see what the opportunities that they would like to do, and what opportunities there might be for building a more circular economy, for growing crops that have multiple benefits, or repairing infrastructure that might have negativity, and how we could actually create this sort of plan for investment. So the Natural Environment Investment Readiness Fund project is our current project that, again, is farmer-led and farmer-involved. And this is really about trying to solve that problem. It's about trying to say, rather than us trying to do behaviour change or trying to make farmers change the way they farm, it's about trying to capture this opportunity of asking them what help they need, how they can actually tell us what investments they need, what their aspirations are, how they can be better connected to their community, their neighbours, through farmer groups and clusters. And so the ambition here is to create a sort of green investment portfolio for our county that actually links this sort of like the economic security that builds all of our health and well-being. Having wealth is important to health, but actually builds resilience to that economy by understanding how we can manage land to reduce things like flood risk and ensure things like supply chain. So because we have this methodology where we work through water bodies, but we also work to administrative areas, that we wanted to work and choose projects that were actually linked directly to the water environment. So we chose 3 water bodies, which I'll talk about really quickly. And they were really about, the first one with the churn was, could we connect people who were impacted by flooding in the churn to the businesses that are actually impacted? And I'll talk a bit about that. It's really exciting. In Fairford, we were looking again at the group of farmers in Fairford. Could we look at whether or not it's one of the places there's massive discharges of sewage? Could we actually build on what we'd learned in the Wild project and start to think about whether we could separate clean and dirty water and create community energy from human waste? And we've been successful in securing some funding to do a feasibility study there. And that was also built around this idea that we need to create income for farmers so that they don't actually have to put so much pressure on the land. If we could create an alternative income that would enable them to farm more agroecologically or regeneratively, then they might need an income from something like an energy source, or that wasn't trapping agriculture into intensive agriculture to get waste. This is about human waste. And then the other one was about benchmarking different types of farming practice across a whole water body. So our target outputs were really to look at whether or not we could create this natural capital methodology, which we've done effectively by using UK habitat classification and secondary management codes to attribute function to the land for ecosystem services. Could we create an opportunity wish list from all of the farmers? So farmers are asked to fill in, what's your dream? What would you really like to do? What do you really need? What would help you? And then we wanted to directly link that not only to our economic strategy for resilience, but also to our local nature recovery strategy, as I was saying at the beginning, to be able to evidence the climate and nature positivity and biodiversity recovery, and looking at how we can strengthen and relocalize supply chains so that we can become much more resilient. And actually in that as well, looking at reducing sort of flood risk and delivering against all those other agendas that are now duties of local authorities. And really trying to work out how we can facilitate and integrate all of the sort of social capital resources and funding from multiple sources. So in the turn, it's been really, really, really interesting. It's been just such a fab project. So to give you some sort of scale, this catchment says little water body, sorry, is about 8-10 miles long from top to bottom. Cirencester is a little grey bit in the middle. We've got all of the farmers that are the major farmers who are involved, and all those little field parcels we're trying to find in the middle, to be able to create a map of maps for the catchment, which basically gives us detailed maps of each farm using the land out mapping to get that detailed mapping and understanding of what farmers want, and mapping that, and then actually creating a sort of map of maps for the whole catchment so that we can actually start to create a localized investment portfolio. We've engaged, which you'll see later on in the presentation, over 40 small to medium enterprises in Cirencester that are directly impacted by flooding, and they're starting to understand what it is in the catchment directly they could invest in, whether that's small interventions like sort of tree planting or hedge planting or wetlands or whatever it is that we decide is appropriate and the farmers want to do. So there will be some river restoration, but there'll also be some other things that farmers might want to ask for that people might get involved with. I'm also about to connect with Waitrose and Tesco's and St James's Place, who also have assets in Cirencester, to see whether or not we can now start to be able to get bigger organisations to look at how we can make their assets resilient by investing up catchment. And all of this data we can amplify across different water bodies and publish back that local nature recovery strategy. In Fairford, building on the WILD project, it's a second project under the NERF project, that say we know that water gets into the foul system, we know that it's discharging horrible amounts of raw sewage, and we wanted to do this project because I wanted to do two things. One was I feel that there's an enormous wasted resource in human waste as being something that we could use as a feedstock, and obviously the water companies are starting to think about that, but that could be something where communities own their own waste and create their own off-grid energy. But actually the pyrolysis that we're exploring would actually enable us to produce biochar that could go back to the farms and build soil health and capture carbon. So really interesting. And one of the things that we found in these case studies of these water bodies is that these assets and these individuals at the bottom of each of these water bodies effectively have got big companies that could start to fund the facilitator, that could join up not only the groups of farmers and do all the environmental assessments, but could facilitate the join up of all the funding. In Fairford, Lakes Bayou have £1.5 billion worth of assets that flood currently with sewagey water. So for them, funding a facilitator to help join up all the action from the catchment partnership, create natural flood management and infrastructure repair, and actually invest in green energy makes a really sensible opportunity. And then in the last one, the Kemble to Waterhay, again, we've had 5 different farmer types, allowing us to benchmark using the Soil Association Exchange the different types of farming. So we have a wilding farms up at Sapperton, which is a rewilding project. Then we have an agroecological farm that's actually just set up just next door to those. We have conventional farm, agroecological horticulture, and some conventional, some pastoral, some pasture for life pastoral farms. So we'll be able to do some benchmarking on that. I just need to check the time. So just to sort of scoot through, really, this is my late dad's field. My view has been always that, there is a huge opportunity for our farmed environment to deliver services for society. These fields used to flood this village where I grew up with silty, horrible water under a conventional system of arable. My father saved up his pennies and bought these fields and then put them back down to species rich grassland with double cross hedges with trees in the middle that actually deliver multiple benefits to society. And actually, that this village has got no memory of flooding other than somebody as old as me, but it's also delivering all those wonderful services, and it does also produce food as well. So as far as we're concerned, in the part of what we do really is that we feel that there's an enormous opportunity to deliver all these opportunities that we've been talking about creating that evidence, about creating that opportunity for investment, for aligning and aggregating funding from multiple sources. But to do that, you need people who have the skills, not only the skills to get the money or whatever, but it's the interpersonal skills, the social skills, the valuing and communicating with the farmers and the other partners to create a positive team where we're all benefiting each other and making sure that we're all valuing it and respecting each other and doing that together to build, community resilience and in a climate emergency. And for us, I think it's quite interesting because the way that this is sort of panning out, that we're now starting to see that if you could get seed funding to do the original scoping for a water body, you could then find out who the beneficiaries might be, look at those who could aggregate that funding to create the opportunity for an advisor who could then bring all these opportunities together in a locality. And we're going to try and play that out through our economic partnership, our nature partnership, and our flooding team and our county council. I've got a call this afternoon. So just to finish off, I hand over to Bea, that some of those on the call may have seen me present this before, but at the moment we've got a really sort of disparate situation, quite a critical situation where the government really doesn't understand the value of supporting farmland. We've got a real risk coming with the potential of ending of some of the mid-tier agreements, no real sort of like transition through to sort of a sustainable farm incentive, and others that farmers have sort of had as their bedrock. There's multiple different funding streams. I mean, there are so many. I was on a farm and there was at least 7 I could have applied for from different people. And we understand that, you know, at the top of the tree here is you've got all the different government departments sort of throwing out money that comes down to local authorities that then don't know what to do with it with all their new governance or haven't got the resources to help. So we as partners and catchment partners and people working with farmers and communities need to really understand how we can help co-deliver and actually utilise that funding and actually get that onto the ground, delivering best practice for people, and actually helping to enable that investment for transitional change into a circular economy that benefits all the things that we've been talking about. So I've put a few resources in there just in case people would like to see them. There's some more information on our webpage, and there's an animation that we've done and a community guide. It's a national guide. And I was just going to pass over to Bea, who's going to just finish off on the last bit after my run through of all of the things that we've been doing, and I hope you've got lots of questions later. Thanks, Bea.
Thanks, Jen. So Jen's done a whistle-stop tour of how organisations like FWAG that have got lots of experience working with farmers already, what we can achieve when we spend that time working with farmers over long periods of time. Now, obviously, not all of the organisations that you work for will have that luxury when you're approaching farmers. So I'm doing the sort of colouring by numbers part of this in comparison to Jen's wonderful Mona Lisa of projects. When we were looking through these slides just earlier today, Jen suggested changing my title, Approaching Farmers, to Helping Farmers, and I decided to leave it in because it's quite a good illustration of the fact that as catchment hosts, we're coming often to farmers with an agenda, and we feel that, you know, we're making an approach to them because we want something, we want to offer them something, we want to ask them for something. But actually, it's really helpful to reframe that as helping farmers, because even if you don't work for a farming charity, I think coming with that mindset will make a huge difference. So these are just a few things that you might want to consider if you do want to help farmers to achieve some of these landscape benefits. Who works with them already? FWAG works with a lot of them already, but FWAG doesn't work across the Thames Basin. It's a Southwest organisation. So who else is working there? Have you got an organisation that's got a contract with the water company to deliver some support to reduce the herbicides? Do you have farmer clusters in your area? It's very likely you do have farmer clusters in your area. And so can you contact the facilitator who will be a trusted person through whom you can speak to more of the farmers in that area? Are you offering something or are you requesting something? If you want to give out free stuff that people want, that's going to be much easier. But if you're offering something that kind of is actually a request, insofar as the farmers may not feel like they're being offered something that's entirely for them, then that needs a little bit of thinking about. And it kind of brings on to the next question, which is why might they want to prioritise it? How can you offer them something or request something of them that actually makes sense for them? Could it help them to meet some of their targets in one of their schemes? Will it help them to become more investable in some way? Will it help them become compliant with some of their kind of basic environmental compliance targets? So you really want to be thinking about what they might want to get out of it. And someone like a facilitator will be able to help you to figure out what that is. You know, a good facilitator or person that kind of works regularly with farmers will be able to help you with that. Then is it a good time of day to contact them, or time of day to hold a webinar? Are you doing trying to give a presentation to dairy farmers at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, in which case they're not going to show up? Are you trying to get a load of arable farmers to come to an event right in the middle of drilling season or harvest? So again, getting advice from someone who understands the farming calendar will be really helpful, because there are times of the year when FWAG advisors just won't even bother to try and get something out of anyone, and people aren't looking at their emails or anything, let alone turning up to events. Can it dovetail or hit multiple goals? So for example, I went out with my colleague the other day to do some soil sampling, taking some cores for some carbon baselining, and we did it for the purposes of an NFM project that Jenny has been leading. But actually those farmers are going to be able to use the results from that soil carbon baselining in their farming in general. They can have that data, so that's kind of doubling up on the kind of outputs of that project. So if you can find a way that what you're asking to do for them or from them can actually benefit them directly, other than your own project goals. Is their time being valued? Now, this is something we come up with quite a lot. We get sent lots of surveys and requests to speak to farmers about this, that and the other. People want to do research on this to help improve crop rotations, or they want to do a survey on that to help improve access to whatever it is. But farmers are extremely busy, and if they're not going to see the direct benefit of helping someone develop an app for crop rotations, then you need to think about valuing their time properly for them to take that 20, 30, 40 minutes to respond. And especially if it's a longer period, if you want them to be involved in a project more long term, then you need to think about whether you're valuing their time, whether that's financially by actually paying them for their time when they can't be on their farm making money by growing food, or whether you're valuing it some other way that kind of offers something back to them. How can you minimize disruption? That's something that comes up quite a lot, especially with NFM. You might be taking machinery onto their land. You might be interrupting their rotations, especially livestock rotations. So speak to them or someone that's kind of familiar with their type of farming system. If you want to kind of make sure that you're offering them something, goes back to the time of season or year, you want to make sure that you're not going to be disrupting their kind of management of their farm with whatever you're doing. And then finally, what happens when you go away? It's all well and good offering someone this wonderful, I don't know, leaky dam or something, or like a lovely kind of buffer strip of agroforestry or whatever it is. But what happens when the stream becomes overshaded, or a load of the trees dry because it's a drought summer? Or what if they're not quite sure how they need to manage something and they need some support with that? So have a really good think about making it clear to landowners what support is available for them after the lifetime of the kind of active part of the project, because that will make a big difference, especially if you're talking about funding. If farmers have taken a strip of land out of production to become a riparian buffer, then there might be funding for that for the next 5 years, say, in a particular scheme. But what's going to happen after that? So do consider that and try and be upfront about what that's going to look like. Next slide, it's the last one. Jen, can you go forward one?
Hang on, I am trying. Got stuck. Hang on, it's just gone to sleepy, that's all, sorry. There you go now.
Thank you. And then just briefly, farmer events. So obviously it's a kind of quick way to access farmers, there I go again, to help a lot of farmers at once, shall we say.
We'll get there, Bea.
Yeah, it's so easy to frame it like that. So, and some of these are the same question: who works with them already? Why do they want to prioritise it? and is it a good time of year? It's also important to ask those questions for things like this. On the right, you can see the agroforestry farm walk. You know, if this is happening in October in Somerset, but if that was happening in the middle of, I don't know, lambing season, and you were trying to do something with livestock agroforestry, then it probably wouldn't be a good time of year. And then who else can be invited to those events other than the landowners and farmers themselves? Do you want to invite local government officials? Do you want to invite local businesses? Is there some other way that that can be made more useful? And can the farmers get something out of it other than it kind of being an interesting business or land management proposition? Can they actually have a nice time while they're there? Because that goes quite a long way in getting bums on seats. And then, of course, offering them some delicious local food. The webinar at the bottom is coming up. That's one that FWAG is running, which you're very welcome to tell people about. That's on the events section of our website. Okay, next one. This is just one that is one of Jenny's slides, actually. That's an example of an event that Jenny ran this summer that had 37 medium enterprise owners, plus the farmers from the local area, plus representatives from the town council and the Royal Ag. And these are all photos from that event, and you can see how busy and bright and lovely it was. So this is the kind of thing that we aim for.
And that's me hugging the MP, who was absolutely wonderful. So she's the MP that launched the Climate and Nature Bill, and this is a really just to finish off because we're finished now. But this is really interesting. How simple the coming together of this actually was, because Nick Hunt, who's the chair of the Cirencester Chamber of Commerce, actually was aggregated all the businesses, and lovely Luke from Three Keel, who's just helping himself to some food there, all local food, and the farmers from the farmer group, and the cohesion that it built was absolutely wonderful. And to me, this is the level of community, the level of locality that we need to build resilience for all the things that we've been talking about, whether that's flooding, water quality, food security, and just good social interaction, and rebuilding our society in that way. Thank you very much, everyone. That was any questions would be most welcome.
Don't be shy.
Yeah, there's not such thing as a stupid question, so please do feel free to ask anything. Yes. Or I can go back over anything if I rushed through it.
Hi, Jenny. Yeah, I've got probably a stupid question, but
that's okay.
I was quite intrigued. You mentioned food waste as a food stock. What does that actually mean?
I didn't. Human waste, not food waste. So basically,
oh, sorry, sewage waste. Yes, sewage waste.
Sewage waste, not food waste. But basically, all of the different feedstocks that are currently going in to produce allegedly sustainable energy, quite a lot of those are trapping sort of like people into intensive agricultural systems to produce that feedstock for those plants. So things like intensive chicken waste or slurries and manures or food waste, which we don't want to see. Whereas actually the one feedstock that we have an enormous amount of that's currently going in our rivers and seas is human sludge, effectively human sewage sludge. So one of the things that we've been looking at, it's not completely innovative. It has been used before, but there's lots of barriers to it. Apparently it's an ideal feedstock, but it's actually that's a feedstock for the AD or pyrolysis plant, not for anything else. There's lots of barriers, there's lots of licenses and lots of things that we've created as ways of prohibiting something that's sensible to try and explore. So yeah, that's what we're trying to look at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's quite a controversial subject, isn't it? I remember back in the probably the 80s now, early 90s, I got in trouble with Thames Water when I asked them about the the sewage sludge or the dried sewage sludge or treated that they spread on fields and so forth.
Yeah.
I mean, I was interested from a botanical point of view, but
Yeah.
they got most upset about that.
Yeah, and I think that the trouble with the sewage sludge, even the raw sewage sludge, as you say, that they put on the fields, is actually got microplastics in it and all sorts of things like that. And the idea of pyrolyzing it, obviously there may be things that you have to still manage in relation to heavy metals and things from a pyrolysis process, but actually the biochar going back to the field would be much better for the environment. Claire's got her hand up.
Thank you.
Hi. Just so I work with, I'm in Environment Agency and I work with a lot of the CABA partnerships. We find that a lot of the CABA partnerships often tell me that it's really hard to engage with farmers, and V, what you presented there explains a lot of the why. But you mentioned the calendar, sort of like an agricultural calendar of times of the year when it's most tricky. I was wondering whether you actually had something that was shareable that would help the partnerships to identify when those tricky times are.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Claire, because a lot of us who work with the farming industry just sort of know that sort of stuff. And I think that, as you say, that farming's become such a sort of like slightly dissociated industry from many people that actually that's not necessarily known. And I think that, so yeah, I think we could quite easily produce one of those. I mean, it's quite difficult because different sectors have different busy times. So in a sense, if you're in a different area, a different region, you'll have different people, as Bea was saying, that if it's a dairy, it might be a daily time that's a challenge, or if it's sort of like lambing, or if it's harvest or drilling, or it might be calving. It's actually knowing what's going, and also it's about the weather. So for example, at the moment it's lovely and sunny. We've just had a period of rain after a very long period of dry. I know for sure that all of my farmers for the next 3 to 4 weeks will be drilling. That's all they'll be doing. They'll be desperately trying to get, and there is absolutely no point. And in fact, we see it as a point of respect that we sort of, I mean, I will email somebody and go, I haven't touched for a month because I know you'll have been drilling. I mean, like a lot of my farmers, I won't even, from about July through till September, we'll sort of almost say, have a good summer, hope it goes well, see you in a couple of months. And then you'll find something like DEFRA or somebody put out some sort of grant scheme in the middle of July that needs farmer consultation, and you're like, no. So anyhow, so yeah, and I think that's respect, isn't it? We're all busy, and I think from my experience, because I also volunteer for a farming help charity, is that the farmers at the moment are under so much pressure with changes in support and worrying about being able to business plan because of changes in all sorts of things. And actually, as I say, that's why I changed at the beginning to say, thinking about the person, that's what we do. We go down the farm gate and sort of say, how can we help? Because there's a lot of pressures. And I think that if you're asking them, for example, about something like water vole habitat, and they've got a large, I don't know, overdraft, or they've got something they've got to get in the ground or whatever, you've got to pick your moment. And I think that what we tend to do is we tend to go down and say, what are the big issues we can help with, and then resolve all the big issues as much as we can. And then you'll normally find with human nature, they'll turn around and say, well, what did you want us to do? How can we help? But actually you've got to get it into that stage of their mind where actually they're at that point of being able to be receptive. It's the same for all of us, I suppose.
I've put in the chat 2 links. One's Countryfile and one's Game and Wildlife. Jen, GWCT game. Anyway, GWCT. That's got some links to their versions of a farming calendar for the year.
Yeah. Thank you. That's great.
Any other questions? I think the one thing that I would say is that quite often, and even yesterday, I'm on the climate change committee's agriculture advisory group, and it's interesting because people still sort of bulk farmers as a bit like, they're all the same. And as we know, none of us are the same, and there's so many different types of farmers and so many different types of farming. And so I think for us it is that interpersonal, that social skill that is about going with a view that, I mean, the mantra that I try and say to my team is be helpful, you know, be kind and be helpful. And I think that if you go through life with that approach, and that's the same that I say back to the farmers, to, you know, be nice to the Environment Agency people, be nice to that, you know, if we're all more respectful to all of us, then actually we'll all build much better relationships. And I think that trust building is the bit that we try and do, and we sort of say, no, actually, you know, Matt, he's lovely, you know, and it's sort of like it is that thing about building trust and relationships, and that only comes out of being useful and feeling that, you know, you're there for positive reasons and for the greater good of them, as well as what it is that we all need to do to make ourselves all more resilient. Well, hopefully that's okay, everybody. Useful. If you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to give us a shout. We'll do what we can. And yeah, if there's anything that you want us to sort of let us say, information we can share, or tell us more about mapping methodologies, or if you've got any expertise to help towards how we make sustainable energy from human waste, help us back. Thank you. So all good stuff.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jenny and Bea. It would be wonderful if you can share the presentation after the meeting as well, so I can share it with everybody else. I'll also include the links on the farmers calendar that Bea kindly shared with us, and take it from there. But like I mentioned, I just came out of a meeting that was focusing around farmers, and this will definitely be something they'd be interested in. So thank you very much. And if there's no further questions from anyone, I think we'll just round it up. Thank you for attending. I believe that was nice and successful, and we'll speak soon.
Thank you
Thanks,
for having us.
everyone.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.